At the dinner table, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "Avery, don't speak unless I ask you to." The room went silent. Even the silverware seemed to freeze midair. Harper smirked behind her wine glass. My father stared at his plate like it might save him. And my grandmother, back after 20 years of disappearing without a trace, studied me with an expression that didn't match anyone else's. It wasn't judgment. It was fear. A fear meant for me. I felt something shift in my chest, sharp and electric, as if the house itself was holding its breath. What none of them knew was that before this night ended, the truth buried under this roof would rip everything apart. My name is Avery Collins. I'm 28 years old, a freelance graphic designer by day and a barista by night. And for most of my life, I've been the invisible daughter in a house that pretended to be perfect. I didn't realize how early it started until the memories began stitching themselves together in my mind. I can still see myself at 8, sitting at the kitchen table with crayons scattered everywhere, when my mother slid a stack of papers in front of me. "Just sign here." "Sweetheart," Linda said, tapping the page with a red polished nail. I didn't know what it was. I just remember her smile tight, impatient. I signed because children don't question the adults who feed them. I didn't know it back then. But that shaky little signature would matter later. The house always smelled like her vanilla candles. Sweet, overwhelming, suffocating. It blended with the sound of her heels on the hardwood, a rhythm that dictated the entire family's breathing. Harper was 5 then, already the sun in my mother's solar system. I used to watch Linda pile mashed potatoes onto Harper's plate while sliding mine away with a clipped, "You've had enough." I swallowed that moment like all the others, but it carved something into me. I remember Grandma Eleanor's stories on the porch swing her soft voice, the way her fingers brushed my hair. She smelled like lavender and old books. Then one day she was just gone. No explanation, no goodbye. She needed space. Mom said, "Stop asking." The porch swing stayed, creaking in the wind, a relic of a warmth I wasn't allowed to revisit. As I grew older, the house became a scoreboard of favoritism. Harper got the bigger room. Harper got a new bike. Harper got piano lessons she quit after 2 weeks. I got silence, and chores, and warnings about how ungrateful daughters end up alone. I didn't know it then. But the house was never what it seemed. By the time I was 15, I had learned to move through the Collins house like a shadow, quiet, careful, always aware of Linda's mood before I even stepped into a room. The smallest things set her off: a sock on the floor, a cup left in the sink, a C instead of a B on a math quiz. "Why can't you be more like Harper?" she'd whisper sharply, as if comparison were a kindness. Harper soaked in the praise, basked in the spotlight, never noticing how cold it felt standing outside its glow. There was one night I can't forget. A storm was hitting hard, rain slapping the windows like a warning. I was 17, working on a school art project at the dining table. Mark walked by, glanced at the sketch, and said, "Looks nice." Just 2 words, soft, human. But Linda overheard. She stepped between us like she was shielding him from me. "Don't encourage her," she said. "She'll think she's actually good at it." Her laugh was brittle, the kind that makes your ribs tighten. I pretended not to care. But that moment clawed deeper than I expected. The day I turned 18, Linda handed me a black trash bag. "Pack your things," she said lightly, sipping her coffee. "It's time you learn to live on your own." Harper filmed a TikTok in the hallway while I stuffed my life into plastic. Mark stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped, eyes begging me to understand something he never dared say out loud. I moved into a tiny Denver studio with a leaky faucet and peeling paint, but it was mine. My freedom, my loneliness. Years later, Dylan left me for being too unstable, echoing Linda's favorite insult like it belonged to him. I didn't know it then. But every wound, every slight, Every cold laugh was pointing to one truth, waiting under the floorboards of that house. A truth I was never meant to find. The night of the family dinner, the air outside the Collins house felt colder than it should have for early fall. The porch light buzzed weakly, flickering the way it always had, as if even electricity refused to stay steady under this roof. I stood there holding a store-bought lemon tart, the kind Mom claimed only lazy daughters brought, while my breath fogged in the air. My hand hovered over the door for a second longer than necessary. Old habits. Fear disguised as hesitation. The moment I stepped inside, Linda's voice sliced through the hallway. "You're late." I glanced at the clock. 6 on the dot. "I'm literally on time. You should aim to be early," she said, snapping a dish towel sharply. Like Harper. Right on cue, Harper appeared at the top of the stairs, glossy hair curled, phone in hand. "Hey. Ave," she sang. "Cute jacket. Is that thrifted?" Her smile tugged sideways, just shy of cruel. "Yeah," I said. "It is. Adorable." She slid past me, perfume sweet enough to choke. Mark looked up from setting the table, eyes darting between us. He opened his mouth probably to offer a small, shaky piece, but Linda's stare shut him down before the words formed. Dinner prep was always a performance. Linda barking instructions. Harper pretending to help while filming family moments. Mark tiptoeing around collisions. And me, just filling space. Tonight felt heavier, though. Eleanor was somewhere in the house, back after 2 decades, yet no one seemed eager to acknowledge her presence. When she finally entered the dining room, the world seemed to inhale. Her frame had shrunk with age, but her eyes, those soft, stormy blue eyes, held something sharp, something urgent. She hugged me first, longer than anyone expected. I felt her fingers tremble against my back. "You look tired, sweetheart," she whispered. Linda coughed loudly. "Mother, please sit. We're already behind schedule because Avery didn't arrive early." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. As we settled around the table, the tension thickened like humidity. Harper scrolled through her phone between sips of wine. Mark fidgeted with his napkin. Linda chattered about her renovation plans as if rehearsing for a reality show. Then Harper's phone chimed a bright, chiming alert that cut through Linda's monologue. Harper glanced at the screen. Eyebrows, knitting. Mom," she said slowly. "Why is there a mortgage withdrawal? Under Avery's name." The room fell silent. A suffocating, total silence that wrapped around my throat like a rope. I didn't know it then, but this was the first crack in everything Linda had built. For a moment, no one breathed. Harper held her phone up like it was a detonator. "Mom, seriously, why is Avery's name on this?" Her tone wasn't mocking now. It was confused, edging into scared. Linda didn't flinch. "Harper, stop being dramatic. It's probably a bank error." But Harper shook her head, scrolling rapidly. "It's not an error. It's a recurring withdrawal. Monthly. And, wow, the balance is huge." She turned the screen toward me. "Avery, did you take out a mortgage?" My stomach dropped. "What? No. I can barely qualify for a Target credit card." Linda laughed softly. A brittle, icy sound. "Enough. We're not discussing finances at dinner." Eleanor's fork clinked against her plate. A tiny sound, but somehow it cut through the room. She watched Linda with an expression that could only be described as warning. Mark finally spoke, voice low. "Maybe we should just explain, Mark." Linda snapped. "Not now." The silence that followed felt radioactive. I pushed my chair back slightly. "Explain what?" Linda folded her napkin with surgical precision. "Nothing that concerns you. It literally has my name on it." "And whose fault is that?" she shot back. "You've always been reckless with money. Maybe the bank mixed things up because your credit is." "I didn't take out a loan." I repeated, heat rising in my chest. So where did it come from? Harper looked between us like she was watching two tectonic plates grind together. Mom, did you use Avery's name for something? Linda's jaw tightened. I'm done entertaining this nonsense. But Mark wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were on me. Wet, apologetic, terrified. Something inside me twisted. Dad, do you know what this is? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The guilt on his face was confirmation enough. Eleanor exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding that breath for years. It's time, she murmured. Linda's head whipped toward her. Do not start. But Eleanor didn't stop. Her eyes were locked on me. Sweetheart, there are things you were never told. Things you should have known long ago. My pulse thundered in my ears. What things? Before she could answer, Linda slammed her hand on the table. Mother. Stay out of this. Eleanor didn't even blink. No, not this time. The room seemed to vibrate. Harper froze. Mark crumbled inward. And I felt something shift, like the floor beneath the Collins house was beginning to crack open, releasing 20 years of secrets. I didn't know it then. But the truth wasn't just coming. It was already here. Eleanor pushed her chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood with a harsh, dragging sound that made every muscle in my body tense. She reached into her cardigan pocket and placed a thick, weathered envelope on the table. It looked old enough to hold ghosts. This, she said quietly, belongs to Avery. My name hung in the air like smoke. Linda's face drained of color, then flushed a furious red. Mother, she hissed. Don't you dare. But Eleanor kept going. She nudged the envelope toward me. Her hand trembled, but her voice didn't. Open it. My fingers shook as I slid the papers out. The first page felt soft, worn from being handled too many times. And when I saw my own name in bold letters on the top line, my vision tilted. Property deed. Owner Avery Collins. Effective date when I was 8 years old. A buzzing filled my ears. The room wavered. This isn't real, I whispered. It is, Eleanor said. I signed the house over to you before I left. Linda's chair screeched back as she shot to her feet. That house is ours. It has always been ours. Eleanor faced her fully. And for the first time in my life, I saw steel in her eyes. No. Linda, you were granted temporary guardianship. You were never the owner. The table felt suddenly too small for all the air leaving my lungs. But why didn't anyone tell me? Mark pressed his palms to his face. Avery, don't. I snapped. Don't lie. Eleanor reached for another folded document. Because your mother didn't want me in your life. She gave me an ultimatum. Avery, leave the house, or lose you and Harper forever. My chest tightened, ribs squeezing inward. You didn't leave willingly. Of course she didn't. Linda spat. She was meddling. She thought she knew what was best for my children. I did, Eleanor said softly. But you punished me for it. Harper's eyes filled with tears. Mom, is that true? Linda didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was a confession. Then Eleanor handed me another paper, a scanned copy of a legal form. Voluntary relinquishment of guardian authority. Signed by Eleanor Whitmore. Witnessed by Linda Collins. Except the signature at the bottom looked shaky, uneven, forced. I swallowed hard. You made her sign this. Linda's voice cracked. I did what I had to do. No, I said. You did what benefited you. Eleanor nodded toward the basement door behind me. There's more. I kept originals hidden down there. Your mother tried to destroy them, but she didn't know I'd taken copies. The basement, the locked room, the place we weren't allowed to enter. Mark suddenly broke, the words spilling out. Linda took out the mortgage under your name. We were drowning. The renovations, the investments. You thought I'd never find out. My voice was ice. Harper covered her mouth. sobbing softly. Avery, I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know. Linda slammed her fist on the table. You should be thanking us. Everything we did was for this family. I stood, slowly, calmly, a kind of cold clarity settling over me. For 20 years, I said, you used this house to control me, to shame me, to make me feel like I owed you my life. But it was mine. All along, Linda's lips parted, a silent shriek forming. Eleanor placed her hand over mine, steady and warm. Now you know the truth. Something inside me shifted. Not rage, not grief. Power. And when I looked up, my voice was no longer shaking. This ends tonight. The room felt impossibly still after I said it. Even the air seemed to step back, waiting to see what I would do next. Linda opened her mouth. But whatever defense she was about to spit out dissolved when I reached into the envelope and pulled out the final document Eleanor had tucked inside. It wasn't old. It was crisp, recently notarized. A sworn legal statement from Eleanor and her attorney, Valerie Trent. In the event that Avery Collins is denied rightful ownership of the property, or if her guardians engaged in coercion, fraud, or financial exploitation, Eleanor Whitmore will testify fully and pursue legal action on her behalf. Linda's face went ghost white. You planned this, she whispered to Eleanor. You planned all of this. For once in my life, Eleanor replied, I planned to protect the right person. I slipped the papers back into their envelope, folded it neatly, and slid it into my bag. My heartbeat was steady now, too steady. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm hits the shore. I'm not making a scene, I said quietly. I'm not dragging this out, but I am taking back what's mine. Mark flinched. Avery, please, we can fix this. You had 20 years to fix this, I replied. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. Harper leaned closer, eyes widening. Linda froze. An eviction notice. 30 days. No. Linda breathed. You can't do this. I already have. I said, legally. The silence that followed wasn't suffocating anymore. It was freeing. Like the first breath after breaking the surface of deep water, Eleanor stood beside me, looping her arm through mine. Come on. Sweetheart, let's go home. Home. The word didn't feel like a cage anymore. But as we walked toward the door, I glanced back at the house, at the walls that had held every lie, every wound, every stolen piece of me. They thought they had used this house to break me, but they had just handed me the one weapon I needed.